This is a prelude to an essay that we're going to publish pretty soon. The working title is The Perils of Monetocracy, and we argued that the Federal Reserve is hijacking the US system of checks and balances and enabling overspending. It's not clear if the Federal Reserve is the culprit or the victim here, and I'm going to discuss this in much deeper detail in the essay, and of course in the conversation about the essay once we publish the essay. What I want to talk about today is a more immediate situation in the markets, which is related. That's why I'm starting this episode with the prelude of the perils of monetocracy. And I think what happened in the last couple of days is actually a pretty dramatic shift in the stance of the Fed. And the Fed is signaling to the markets and in particular to the government that it's not going to monetize debt anymore, or at least it's trying to get out of this vicious circle that we're all stuck in. And that has led to a massive increase in interest rates. I would say 30 to 40 basis points in the last couple of days. Of course, turmoil in the market. We expect more volatility to come. It's not exactly the best situation to be in the markets right now. We expect some turmoil here, but overall, this is one of those things that, like, you want to do the right thing, and you're going to do the right thing, and it's going to cost you right now, but in the long term, it's going to be the right thing to do for us as portfolio managers, and of course for the Federal Reserve and for the whole system. So the episode here is discussing this situation and the most immediate reaction to the markets. This is a Not Even Wrong podcast. It's September 25th, 2023. This is Krim Delko. For today, the fund is up 2%. The market is up 40 basis points. For the year, we are up 111.3%. The market is up 12.9%. We're outperforming by 98.4%. Let's start with what's going on. So the Federal Reserve had the FOMC meeting last Wednesday. Since then, interest rates in the long end are up about 30 to 40 basis points. The market has been in turmoil. We've had volatility. We had a drawdown in our portfolio. And what is happening is, of course, a stance signaled by the Fed, higher for longer, which means rates in the long end are expected to be higher for longer. Also in the short end, actually, it's not necessarily a term curve situation. In fact, the Fed is signaling that we cannot lower rates anytime soon. And today at Macro Musings, shout out to Macro Musings again, there is an episode actually that published this morning, which had one of the older Fed officials on. Names don't matter. I'm gonna put the show in the show notes so you can go listen to yourself to the interview. This person has been organizing Jackson Hole for a while, so this is definitely a pretty high level, high ranking kind of Fed official. And he said on the interview, he said that we are in danger of losing control of interest rates. The government debt is too high, and that we don't expect it to come in anytime soon. And this is a bad situation. We don't have a good solution. It's depressing, but it is what it is, and we have to deal with it. We have to look at it and name it and make it a problem, and then hopefully we can solve it. So this is, to me, the first time that I've heard a Fed official actually officially talk about this. I mean, I was at a seminar 2 weeks ago at Stanford with very distinguished macroeconomists, monetary economists, finance economists. And I asked the question, what about government debt? And they told me, oh, we haven't thought about this. Basically, they were trying to brush it under the table. And I think, certainly not because of my intervention, but there has been a shift in the way the Federal Reserve thinks about this. Now, my interpretation is the Federal Reserve is seeing the dangers of high government debt and deficits and to be forced to monetize this debt, and therefore is trying to intervene, trying to tell the government that we're going to keep interest rates high. Your interest rate bill is going to be high. We're not going to let you keep spending money. This is the positive interpretation. Of course, there's many other interpretations you could have. Maybe this is just a fluke. Maybe this is just some sort of, whitewashing, and in the end, they're going to monetize it anyway. But this is the situation we're in, and I don't think we can speculate too much about what these people might think, or if there's alter motives. Let's just take them at face value. What they say is that we are afraid that we could spiral into a massive debt monetization, death spiral a la Japan, where the economy gets sclerotic because all the money that's printed is just there to fill holes, and there's no room for competition. There's no room for growth. There's no room for anything. This is the fear scenario. Of course, we're not Japan, we're not Europe, we're different, so it's going to be different. But in the end, we will reason by analogy. That's why we're using Japan and also Europe as an example, and then we will we will try to, of course, make sense out of all this for the United States. So let me lay the ground first. Let me explain what is the actual problem. So we have the problem, and I'm discussing this in the essay, The Perils of Monetocracy. The problem is the following. The US system has been designed with checks and balances in mind. And this goes back to the founding fathers. And the US system has been incredibly successful because it's built on the pillars of liberty, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. And maybe this sounds a little bit like some sort of congressional library presentation now, but it's the truth. This is really what the whole system is built on, and it's attracted millions of people from all over the world to find their luck, to find their success and their happiness in the United States. It's still happening. We have thousands of people crossing the border every day, legally, illegally, trying to make a living in this country. It's not that we're the best system, but we're the least worst system, and it's because of the pillars of the pillars on which this country is built on. And why am I talking about all this? It's important to understand that the founding fathers, the people who drew the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, and then later on Ben Franklin and the people around him, and Washington and Hamilton, the people who actually executed after the war was won and created this country, they all had checks and balances in mind because they knew that you can't run this country otherwise. It's going to end up in some despotic tyranny. This is how humans are. This is particularly how the times were back then. There was no hope that without a very fierce checks and balances system, you can have a system that will eventually not fall back into tyranny. Okay, now what happened is we have then the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, which is, I would say, maybe not the original sin per se, but definitely the beginning of the end. Why am I saying that? Because you have a system now, you have a place or an institution which is created by definition to be independent, right? So by definition, to not be part of the checks and balances system. And I think with good faith, right? People thought that, we don't want somebody to be politicized. We don't want the central bank to be politicized, etc., right? Now, the fundamental problem in this situation is, of course, that now you have a system that is independent of the checks and balances system. But that system itself, the Federal Reserve System, has certain powers. Amongst one of them is to issue the currency. And while it was still built in, and as the name says, in a federal way, so it was built in a way that it's not central, it's not Wall Street centric, it's not Washington centric. It had the seeds of what was to follow. And what was to follow, there's two big events that followed that made the Fed this, what I call monetocracy. One is the dual mandate in 1978, presided over Jimmy Carter, where we added the full employment mandate to the mandate of the Federal Reserve. And full employment just means now it's fully politicized, right? Now you can say, well, we need to support local shipping because it's part of the full employment mandate. We need to support this. We need to support that. Once you have the full employment mandate, it's political. It's now you are part. Now you are part of the political system, but you're still not part of the checks and balances system. So you see where this is going. You have the worst of both. You have not being part of checks and balances, but you have all the politicizing, all the rhetoric, and all of that, which is now part of the so-called monetary policy. And then the original sin, the real sin, is Ben Bernanke buying bonds in 2008. This is direct intervention in the markets, directly supporting banks, directly deciding who wins and who loses. And from there on, we go, Janet Yellen keeps buying bonds. And now we have Jay Powell in the wake of the COVID crisis, actually buying corporate bonds and junk bonds, and really directly intervening in the markets with no constraints anymore. Because now you are in a situation where you can say, well, where's the line? We have people who talk about the necessity to, let's say, support climate change through monetary policy, which is we could buy bonds of companies that have some sort of solution for climate change. We could buy bonds of companies that have, I don't know, more than 50% women in their board, or what way we can start politicizing anything we want, and the Fed is in the position to finance this. This is where we stand today, and this is the problem. And I think the Fed is taking a stance now. The Fed is actually taking an open stance, saying we don't want to participate in this anymore. We actually want to make sure that there is no, at least we're not going to monetize the government debt anymore. Because as a corollary of this interventionism and the monetocracy, we have now Congress basically sniffing the opportunity, understanding that there is a free-for-all where you can keep spending money on Medicare, you can keep spending money on defense, whatever the aisle is you're in, and whatever you think you need to do to support your cronies, you can do it because there is no constraint. And this is the fundamental problem. There's a lack of constraint, and with the lack of constraint, spending goes up. And this is where we stand today. We have 33 trillion in debt, and this is just accounted for. Who knows how much other liabilities there are. We have a very high interest bill, and that is what the market is feeling. Now, I think what's different today, and this is the purpose of this episode, is the Fed is starting to take a stance. This is the news. If it's good or bad, I think it's good news. It might hurt us. We've been there before. Almost a year ago, and we had a massive drawdown after the episodes that we had about the Fed is now taking a stance, raising rates, trying to stop the government from spending money. We went through it. We recovered. Unfortunately, we're back to square one. Now, we hope that this time the drawdown will not be as dramatic, because we also have, particularly in our portfolio, the companies are much stronger, in a much stronger position. But of course, they can't undo the macro effects that will affect everybody. For example, high interest rates will make it difficult for people to buy cars. That will affect Tesla. So we'll have that kind of problem. But we have a very strong dollar, which will hurt emerging markets. Even Europe can be hurt, because a strong dollar is always it's a vacuum cleaner for everything else in the market. So we have these types of dynamics. But let me just finish here. We'll have a lot more discussion about this, because as I said, we're just publishing, we're in the process of finishing the essay, The Perils of Monetocracy, where we discuss all of the problems of the Federal Reserve and the monetocracy. We call it monetocracy, which is an unchecked, rule by directive, rule by fiat, by unelected bureaucrats, which is really it's some sort of dictatorship. We have no recourse. I can't call the Fed and tell them what to do. I can call my representative. I can even vote for the president, but I can't do anything about the Fed. They can do whatever they want, and they have a huge impact on people's livelihoods. Some people take advantage, some don't. But like I say in the essay, if you want to design a government, always design it with the worst enemy in mind, meaning imagine the worst of your enemies is running the government. You want to have a government that is designed so even then you can have a decent life and a decent livelihood. Right now, we're in a very tough spot where we have the monetocracy and we have a government which is, let's say, to say it mildly, not afraid of interventionism and using all tools from rhetoric to money to drive its agenda. And that is, of course, hurting a lot of sectors in the economy, and it's making it very difficult for the productive sectors to keep growing. So having said all of that, again, to summarize, we are now, at least we have one step forward by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is taking a stand and saying, we don't want any of this anymore. We don't want to be part of this. We don't want to monetize that. Rates will be high until you guys stop wasting money. And that, in the long term, is a good thing. Thank you.